A mainstream media house of India presents a news item that informs Taiwan wants to learn English. This implies as if English is excluded from the education system of Taiwan. Here, it is important to realize that news contents and wordings are carefully selected and presentations carefully designed to transmit a message in disguise of a simple news item. Primary objective is not the transmission of news itself, but transmission of a message hidden in the news that serves the interest of, in this case, corporate class. Here is an excerpt from the news item in question.
Now to Taiwan, it wants people to learn English and it's ready to spend almost $1 billion to push for it. The government says it wants to make Taiwan bilingual and it has set a deadline for this, the year 2030. This money, the $1 billion, will be spent over the next 5 years. What do people in Taiwan speak right now? Mostly Mandarin Chinese. And why does Taipei want to switch to English? To boost the economy.
We will discuss why a mainstream Indian media is presenting this news item and what might be the hidden agenda, if any, behind such presentation. This news item seems to transmit that learning English is the key to boost the economy of any given country. Viewers of this presentation are not likely to question if English could boost economy, why then Anglophonic Africa, whole of Caribbean, most of the South Asia are suffering from grinding poverty and underdevelopment ever since people of these countries were tricked and are forced to adopt English for the last 2 centuries. Mainstream corporate media must hide the fact that schooling in mother tongue as the primary language is one of the most important factors for promoting technological development. The education system of every developed country, without any exception, uses mother tongue as medium of instruction. Renowned educationists from world over tell us there can't be any thought process without language. An English person can best think in English, same with Chinese as well. Hence, schooling must use mother tongue, a language of absorption, to facilitate thorough understanding of a given concept. Concept, when thoroughly understood, may be expressed through multiple languages, which are languages of expression. Let's continue to listen to this news item.
You see, whether we like it or not, English is the global language of business. 1/5 of the world speaks it, so it makes sense to do business in a language that most people understand.
Here she claims, English is the global language of business, 1/5 of the world speaks it, so it makes sense to do business in a language that most people understand. Let's understand why this is an important statement. Since the end of World War II, world is dominated by Anglo-American West and English is their language. Hence, English has been closely associated to the politics of world hegemony, meaning exercising control over the world, population and natural resources, exclusively for economic gain of the West. It is therefore understood that progress of a given nation in the modern world is likely to be stranded if significant number of population of a given country can't express their thoughts in English. In the countries of South Asia, that number is only about 5%, and in Africa the figure is 2%. Whereas in all developed countries, between 80 to 90% people are schooled to express thoughts in English. Difference is, in the third world, the goal of schooling is not about learning English. Instead, schooling of third world is designed to slavishly imitate people whose mother tongue happens to be English. Third world countries are fertile grounds for training natives to imitate movement, dress, food, gesticulation, speech, and even skin color and features of Western Anglophones at the expense of all sense of self-respect, pride, and prestige. In other words, schools of third world, under the pretext of education, are designed to de-link young generation from their country of origin.
So promoting a language that facilitates business is essential. It makes sense. Taiwan sees multiple benefits from its switch to English. It will help domestic companies do well abroad. It will attract more foreign investments and tourists. And it will make Taipei more competitive.
She comments, promoting a language that facilitates business is essential. It makes sense. Taiwan sees multiple benefits from its switch to English. It will help domestic companies do well abroad. It will attract more foreign investment and tourists and will make Taipei more competitive. News emphasize that Taiwan sees multiple benefits from its switch from Mandarin to English. Futility of this comment becomes clear to anyone from examples of countries like China, Japan, Korea, and most of the developed West European countries like Germany, France, Scandinavia, and especially Italy. Each of these countries are strict about using their own language, not only for schooling, but all aspects of domestic administration. It is interesting that government of Italy has just recently issued a directive banning use of foreign words with special reference to English in government documents. Violation of this directive may lead to a penalty of as much as $160,000. Let's take a listen to this excerpt.
You cannot use foreign language words in official documentation, not even English words. And those who don't follow this will face penalties.
You could be fined $160,000 in Italy for using English words under a new law. The Italian government wants to ban foreign words in official communication to protect and preserve the Italian language. The draft bill states that English words demeans and modifies the Italian language, so this means you can't use any English in official documents. Italian must be the primary language used in offices, even if you are speaking to foreigners. Several European countries like Russia, France, Germany introduced similar restrictive measures long ago. There is no evidence whatsoever of any adverse effect on international business owing to use of indigenous language to run domestic administration. This is what all developed countries without exception practice with religious dedication. Countries that look up to the culture and language of their colonial masters, despising their own, are invariably pauperized, underdeveloped, and slavishly loyal to the West. These facts are never discussed or explained in mainstream Anglo-American media. Mainstream media of third world countries, mostly owned by Western corporate houses or churches, are even more secretive about such contrasts. Ruling oligarchs of the third world countries have invented weird logics to support slavish imitation of Anglo-American language and culture and covertly justify despising everything indigenous. Why Italy, France, Russia, and many other prosperous countries have outrightly banned infiltration of English words in their respective mother tongue will be conveniently and dutifully hushed up so that psychological enslavement of the third world through Western schooling is not questioned. This implies real purpose of this narrative is not Taiwan wants to learn English, but a hidden agenda. We will get to that in a moment. Narrative continues.
And then there's India. The story is a bit more complicated here. Only about 10% of India knows English. But considering India's population, it's a pretty big number. India has the second largest English-speaking population in the world. It's a massive market that foreign firms want to tap into. Also a source of English-speaking labor.
She says English is a route to upward mobility and allowed some of us to thrive economically. A couple of important points to be noted here. About 10% or 115 million out of 1.4 billion people of India, due to Western-type schooling, are able to express their thoughts in English. The real number is probably 5%, but that is beside the point. Fact is, domestic administration of India is conducted exclusively in English in the interest of and by the 115 million Anglophonic Indians called Kala Angrez or Black English. Without English, access is denied to higher technical education, competitive examination, job interviews, court proceedings, applications to government offices, business transactions, etc. In short, access denied to all forms of dignified living. Menial tasks are the only option for indigenous non-Anglophonic population, contemptibly also called Desi. How can any nation talk of progress and prosperity by marginalizing 90% of their population? The roles of this 90% are to pay 30 to 35 different taxes, cast vote once in 5 years, and work as menials or at the lowest rank of army and police. For non-Anglophonic Indians, it is living like a foreigner in their own country of origin. Not much different from the days of British rule when just 30,000 white English community ruled over 350 million Indians. Today, that figure is 115 million Anglophonic Indians called Kala Angrez, ruling 1.3 billion Desi. Goal of a civilized, conscientious and cultured nation is not to train cheap labor through imitation schooling and despising everything indigenous. This kind of schooling is characteristic of colonial culture designed to cripple creativity of indigenous population and seriously degrade the quality of human resources. Any given nation, when exposed to such measures, inevitably loses their creativity and ability to contribute to any technological development. Their only convincing role becomes that of cheap labor. This is exactly the role third world countries are playing in the relationship of production. This also explains why over the last 100 years of technological advancement, the third world has made no contribution whatsoever other than supply of cheap labor and raw materials. This specter of third world destiny seems to be haunting leadership of all developed countries of collective West. There must be well thought out reasons why Italy, France, Russia, Germany have made statements to this effect. Italy and France have recently renewed ban on infiltration of English words in their national language, whereas third world elites, especially India, have found enough justification to imitate everything English and despise everything indigenous. The news item further explains how English-speaking skill has helped Scandinavia and other mainland European countries to achieve spectacular development. News continues.
Even countries with no history of British rule. I'll give you an example. At least 85% of the people in all Scandinavian countries speak English. Most mainland European nations have a sizable proportion of English speakers.
It is true that all developed countries all over the world have between 80 to 90% of their population who can express thoughts in English. This makes sense. More of third world population should be schooled to express thoughts in English to find their bearings in the contemporary world dominated by Anglo-American West. Why this is not a contradictory statement in the context where mother tongue-based education is being heavily emphasized? Explanation is, whereas education and domestic administration must be conducted in the medium of mother tongue to ensure better grasp of concepts delivered through schooling, but other secondary languages must be added to facilitate expression of concepts grasped in the school. Every developed country, as explained earlier, strictly use their indigenous language as medium of instruction at all levels of education and domestic administration. Why? This is essential to facilitate thorough grasping of any given concept, required to promote individual creativity and consequent technological development of a nation. This explains why, unlike third world countries, all developed nations use their native language as medium of instruction and domestic administration. Narrative ends by wishing Taiwan luck to achieve their goal of learning English when Chinese dragon is breathing fire and threatening war.
So Taiwan's goal is a tough one to achieve, especially with the dragon breathing fire and threatening war. We wish them luck.
Here is an example of blatant falsification of facts in the statement implying China threatening war. The world, including USA and collective West, has accepted that Taiwan is an integral part of People's Republic of China. Yet, mainstream media of USA and West, including their satellite countries like India, aggressively preach impending Chinese invasion of an integral part of China, which is Taiwan. Now, let's relate to the hidden agenda of this news item. Explicit purpose is to convince listeners that Taiwan is trying to get rid of Chinese language and adopt English instead. This, according to the news, is a good decision. Why? Aim of this presentation is to make viewers believe English is likely to bring about more foreign investment and consequent economic prosperity to Taiwan. That in turn is more likely to get support to resist China, who is threatening war. Bottom line is, learning English is the ultimate savior from all difficult situations, with special reference to West's highly desired conflict with China. Disguised message in the form of news, therefore, is India should continue to be soaked more and more in Anglo-American influence, including language. Why? To ensure further degradation of India's already degraded massive human resources, which is of great concern to Italy, France, and Russia, who are fiercely resisting this phenomenon out of deep sense of national self-respect and dignity. Why should India continue to ape Anglo-American traditions? To ensure degradation of our human resources and consequent loss of our creative forces, which will spawn large number of cheap labor and docile clients for Anglo-American West, meaning access to a huge pool of 90% Desi Indians as cannon fodder when West cooks up conflict with China to protect freedom, democracy, and human rights in Taiwan and India. Wake up, Taiwan. Wake up, India.
If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and